Welcome to Module 5 in 240M at PCC. My name is Robert McMillen, and we're going to talk about configuring Server 2016 printing. So let's take a look at what we're going to talk about, understand how Server 2016 printing works on the network and on the internet. We're going to be talking about the XPS path, the roles that we need to install, and the local versus network printers. We're also going to talk about how to manage print jobs as well. So let's talk about the printing process. Network printing components include the local print device, network print device, client, server, job, and driver. So a lot of things to be considering when you're setting up your Windows network printing. So there's a lot of different steps involved in printing. And the first one is the application that the client generates a print file. So somebody hits the print button from their Windows 10 computer. And then we have a whole series of events that happens up until the point where the job gets spooled either on the local computer or on the server itself, and then it gets translated into something the printer can understand, and then it prints the job. So when a client wants to process a job through the internet, the internet printing client must be installed. So this is something that does not come by default. So the printing client should be installed in the Windows Server 2016 when you install the Windows roles and features through the server manager. And then the client and server can communicate using this common protocol. Of course, you'll have to open up a firewall port on the internet and pass that through to make that happen as well. Print and document services role with the internet printing role needs to be installed, as well as IIS, so the web server that we talked about in a previous module. So we install this print and document services role, and we're going to be doing that in our lab. And there's a lot of good things that you can do with it. So you can configure group policy to also push out printers to the clients. So there's a really easy way of setting up group policy using this print and document services management. When it comes up, you'll be able to choose a printer and say, push this out with group policy. So you don't even have to go into the group policy management console and figure any of that other stuff out. You just choose to push that through group policy. It will go ahead and edit group policy for you. And then the next time that user logs in, it will automatically install that printer. So it's very cool. So there's several different role services. Remember, the server role is the print service role, but the role service are all the different mini roles underneath it. So you've got the print server, which turns the server into a print server. All right, that's pretty common. Then you've got the scan server. So it enables you to do network scanning, which will then send the files to the user's folder or email. Then you've got internet printing, as we mentioned already. And then you also have line printer daemon service. And what that does is it allows Unix and Linux computers to print to shared printers that are managed through Windows Server 2016. So if you have any of these network printers out there, you can use Windows Server in order to manage them. So an advanced way of printing documents for multiple purposes would be the XML Paper Specification. So it's very similar to PDF. So years ago, Microsoft saw that Adobe was really monopolizing the PDF market. And since that time, there's been other companies that have also gotten into PDF because it is an open standard. So Microsoft said, hey, why don't we come up with our own standard? And we will come up with this XPS. And it'll allow us to send print jobs to XPS, which we can then offer as an alternative. And so that's out there. It hasn't really taken off that well. Not that many people have actually done anything with it. But it is an option when you go to print something electronically, which just basically saves it as a file. Now, there's also a devices and printers utility that is part of the control panel. So the control panel has sort of a dumbed down version of what the print services, the network tool has from Server Manager, the tools menu. And what this does is it allows you to also set up shared printers. It also allows you to have set up drivers and set up permissions, but it's not as easy to use. So you end up having to, if you want to do some of the fancier things that you would like to do, you wouldn't use the devices and printers utility in Control Panel itself. But this is what it looks like if you want to do just basic network printing. you would right-click on any one of these printers and choose Printer Properties, go to the Sharing tab, and from there you would set up a network printer. So this print management tool that I was talking about earlier is available as an MMC snap-in. You could go to the Tools menu in Server Manager, lots of different ways to get there, and from there it centralizes your shared printer control all in one place. It enables printer administrators and operators to manage the print functions of some or all the shared printers. So it allows you to manage everything all in one, what they call pane of glass. And this allows you to definitely save a lot of time when it comes to managing printers and pushing them out to clients. So here is what the print management tool looks like. You see the printers, the drivers, you see the accounting.local. So these are printers and drivers that have been pushed out to Active Directory, which you can also do to make these printers searchable. Then you can click on the deployed printers, and you can see what printers have been deployed through group policy. So all these different things are possible using the print management tool. One of the things I like about it is the ability to update a specific print driver. So if a print driver gets out of date, it's easy to update it through using this tool. You can also update it for specific operating systems as well. So if some operating systems use one driver, others use another, it's possible to give them the one that they want based on their OS. In Windows Server 2016, you can configure a printer that is attached to the server computer as a local printer. So not many people do this anymore, but it's still a possibility. But you can connect a USB or an LPT. If you have an LPT connection, it's one of those long horizontal connections. And then you can share the printer off of a printer physically connected to the server. And you do it the same way you do through the TCP/IP type of sharing, except for instead of using an IP address, you just pick a local port instead. So here's an example of what we got here. We have a laser printer connected by internal wireless printer server card. And then we have Windows Server 2016 with physical printers connected to it. So when you go to share them, you do it, as I mentioned earlier, in a similar way. You right-click on the printer, you choose Printer Properties, and then you go ahead and click on the sharing and get the sharing set up. So more than one way to do this. When you add a shared printer, you got to consider some things. First off, the name. So in a similar manner, when you add a shared printer, you got to consider some things such as the printer name. So in a similar manner, when you go to name computers, where you don't want to name them after people's names, because people come and go, you want to name them after their function or their location. Print properties are accessible from the print management tool. As I mentioned earlier, you can right-click on the printer and choose Printer Properties. It says here click Properties, but that's not the case. Clicking Properties doesn't give you the same information. Click Printer Properties. Those are two different options. So here are the printer properties for this brother printer that you see here. And it shows the location. It shows it's a comment. It's a shared color printer. And if you see the sharing tab, you would see also that it was shared with everybody as well. Sharing tab is used to enable or disable a printer for sharing. So if you enable sharing, you got to provide a name for the shared printer. So the name of the printer is not necessarily the name of the share. They could be the same name, but they don't have to be. So you got to come up with a name again. So now we're at the sharing tab. Before we're on the general tab, now we're in the sharing tab. And we see here that the share this printer box has been checked, and we see a name for the printer. So at the top you see this says Brother Color Leg Type 1, but the share name is Office Printer JR. So you do not have to have the same share name as the physical name, as I mentioned earlier. Ports tab has lots of different options, whether it's a local port or a TCP/IP port, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. Bi-directional printing, pretty much all printers nowadays are bi-directional. There's very few exceptions where there's some serial printers out there, especially ones that do multi-forms, that still use unidirectional, but almost all the other ones use bi-directional. Printer pooling allows us to configure two or more identical printers to one print server. Now we're going to do that as an example in our lab, so I won't get too deep into that here, but it'll be something that we talk about in these mini videos. So let's take a look at ports, and you can see an LPT port has been checked, but if you scroll down, you'd also see the option for a TCP/IP port as well. So you can add a port if you want to add a new TCP/IP port for a specific IP address. You can configure it, or you can just delete it altogether. Now the enable printer pooling is there as well. So if you enable printer pooling, you can select more than one port because it all points to the same printer using multiple different ports. But if you don't have that checked, you can only select the one port. So that allows you to add the port. Typically you would add a local or TCP/IP port. So here are your options when you go to add a port. You have local port, which will be LPT, USB, or COM, and you have TCP/IP port, which allows you to add an IP address. You could also use a name as well, as long as that name is in the DNS server that's pointing to an IP address. So it will look to the DNS server to resolve the name to the IP. Advanced tab allows you to have a printer available at all times or limit the hours that you can log in. It also sets the priority, so you can give a particular printer a printer pool priority. Printer scheduling can also be useful as well. So let's take a look at the advanced button. So we see here printer priority. So this is when you have one printer, but you want to have two print queues. So one print queue would have a priority of 1, the other print queue might have a priority of 2, or any other number you want. Whatever has the lowest number has the highest priority. So you could say the executives and the admin both have access to the printer. The executives print to printer priority 1, print queue, and the admins to 2. So if two jobs come in at the same time, then what happens is the executives, they get the priority. So that's, their job will be printed first. So that's what that's about. You also see the driver listed there, where you can change to a new driver. You can change the spooling properties. By default, what you see here is the way it's set up. And then you also have some options here at the bottom that are pretty self-explanatory. You can configure security on a printer. You must have the manage printer permissions for a printer. So one thing that's a quiz alert is what right has the most amount of rights of any printer permission, and that would be the manage printer permissions option. So make sure you keep that in mind. Once a printer is shared, default permissions are as follows. Everybody can print, so there is no limitation. Even people outside of Active Directory, if they're still in your subnet, will be able to print. And then you see these other people that can print and what they can do as well. Take note of the fact that the administrator account has the manage this printer right, along with anybody else who's in the domain administrators as well. So here's what that security tab looks like. There are the rights that you see here. And then there's the permissions for everyone, how everyone is highlighted, and you see that everybody is allowed to do that. There's the manage this printer. That gives you the most amount of rights, manage documents, or special permissions, and then click the advanced button. So we use the advanced button on the security tab to set up these special permissions. We can also set up printer auditing. We can take ownership of a printer if the person who used to own it is now no longer there or shouldn't have access to it. And we can view the effective permissions in the same way as we did in the last module, where we viewed effective permissions of someone with access to a shared folder. The Device Settings tab enables you to specify printer settings that are specific to the printer you have installed. So if you've put in a certain paper size, a font, maybe that printer has duplexing capabilities. So any of those things, that will be showing up in the Device Settings tab. If a printer does not have the ability to do certain things like printing color or duplexing, then some of these options will be left off. Also, if you have the wrong driver, then you might see some features that are left off that should be there, that would be fixed if you got the correct driver. So here is the device settings. You can see that this particular device doesn't have a lot of different options to it, such as duplex unit not installed, so it's not going to be able to do that. There's no selection for it. However, for the type of paper, you can select letter, legal, or whatever else is in that drop-down list. Configuring a non-local printer or an internet printer. So you need to install that particular role service, as we talked about earlier. You can change the properties of the shared printer, even if you are not logged into its host computer. You can manage the remote printer's properties from the print management tool. So here's what that looks like. Here's the network printer search. You can choose the laser printer. There's the IP address. Underneath that, there is the website one for a web printer, and that's what you would go to when you want to go print to it. Managing print jobs. User with print permission can send print jobs to the printer. They can do a few things, mostly with their own print jobs. Print operators, server operators, and other groups have the manage documents, so they can manage any kind of documents that anybody has sent to the printer. However, if you want to manage the entire thing as administrator, then you want to go use the print management tool and have the manage this printer role. There are some troubleshooting for common printer problems that you can use to check things out. Print management tool, quickly check the status of a printer. If it's paused or offline, it'll show that. The icon will change. Many typical problems are due to the spooler service. So if you just go and restart the printer spooler service, then that will fix a lot of issues as well. So we talked all about printing, network printing, document printing. We talked about internet printing and scanning, all different kinds of things with printing using the print management tool. And go ahead and set this up in your lab. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's definitely something that you would not have done in a previous course using the print management tool. So this will all be new to you. Don't forget to use the mini videos when you need to. So we'll see you again in the next module.